And welcome back to Stasis. We just blasted down this door, so let's see what's on the other side. Okay, this is where the hybrids were experimented on.
They're almost human, especially their eyes.
Don't get too close.
I'm half tempted to refer to these guys as Greys, except they don't really look like the traditional aliens. So there's one thing in particular we absolutely need from this room, and you might not be able to see it at first, not until you mouse over it, but there's bone mending glue on this table. And that glue is what's really going to help us solve the major puzzle in this area.
This shit is straight out of the eugenics war. I taught this in my history class. All of this research will be lost. Does that mean that this was for nothing?
For nothing.
You get nothing! Anyway, the hybrids in this room can't really harm us, including the one that's out of the restraints and on the floor. But there are birthing reports here for some of the hybrids, which details who the mother was, the kind of traits that are exhibited by the mother and the hybrid, and it's not particularly interesting, although one of these entries is kind of interesting because of, well, you know, I'm not going to spoil it. Let's just keep going through here and get to Frederick, who's from a non-crew member, very interesting. And it's the last one called Nay who we're really interested in. You'll see why. Yeah, they used John's wife as a host for one of the hybrids. Nasty stuff. But anyway, moving on, there's another room over here, but we don't have to go there yet. In fact, we shouldn't, because now we have everything we need to open up those power cells. So we're going to take a trip down the elevator, and we're going to head over to the labs. There's no particular order you have to do these in. You can go either to the mutagen lab or the birthing lab first. So, we're going to go over to that panel on the ground, and it's locked, so we need to find a way to open it. What we're going to do is take the bone mending glue, and we're going to pour it onto the lid. That bone mending glue is going to harden in the shape of the lock that's on the top of the lid. But we still have to stick it onto something. So we're going to take that twisted piece of metal we ripped off of the robot and combine it with the imprint, and that gives us a power cell housing key. And this is what we can use to open up all of these panels. Like so.
Result in subject termination and or equipment failure.
And for this scene, John plays the unfortunate role of Mercy Angel.
Go to sleep, my baby. Don't worry.
And so not only do the pregnant women die almost immediately, but eventually all the hybrid babies on the wall and that bloated fetus in the tank are also going to die. But we can't worry about that right now because we still have to try and save Rebecca and his wife if she's even still okay. I don't know, seeing her in that report is kind of worrying. So anyway, now we have to go to the other lab, the mutagen lab. And there won't be anything for John to cry about once he pulls out the power cell here. because everything here's a cadaver except for that bloated monstrosity on the table. Not even a warning this time about all the equipment shutting off if you pull out the power cell. Now you might be wondering why exactly we're ripping out all of these power cells. And the reason for that is not going to be apparent until we get into that room next to the room with all the hybrid strapped to tables. Oh, and just pointing out here that if your inventory gets too overloaded, it does eventually get this scrolling feature. I'm not sure if I showed that off in any other videos, because usually we don't have that many items on us at any given point. But now we can head back to the starting point, and there's that other panel, the one we saw right at the beginning. And like the others, we're going to use our power cell housing key and crack this one open as well. Oh, sorry about that. I accidentally used it on John instead of the panel. Oops.
Movement of this power cell will result in power interruptions in areas adjacent to this node.
Well, you know, sometimes sacrifices have to be made. Oh, I really shouldn't have said that after the whole birthing lab thing, but now we have all the power cells, all 3 of them, and we're going to go back to the hybrid lab. As John gets in a few wind sprints along the way. While I do generally find backtracking annoying, in this game you're usually limited in the amount of space you can move at any given time, so backtracking usually just means moving across 2 or 3 rooms, so it's not that bad in Stasis. Now we'll get to see what's in this other room, and pause for dramatic effect. You're really drawing this out, game. Can you please just show what's in the room? I'm dying to tell people what's in this room. It is an operating theater. Sort of. There's just the one-way glass and then all the other space is kind of taken up. So, not the traditional setup for it, but it works nonetheless. Now, there's really no getting around it. We pretty much have to go down there and get near the hybrid. None of the hybrids here pose any immediate threat to us, so not particularly worried about getting too close to it.
Don't go any further. I'm warning you now.
How could you do this?
I do with my children as I see fit.
It's barbaric.
Spare me the pity of the righteous. Your daughter owes her life to me.
What do you know about Rebecca?
ARG was good on this ship, Mr. Malachek. Cancer, HIV, Ebola. I eliminated them all. Her life is mine to do with as I choose. Oh yes, I know about everything, Johnny boy. I know about your daughter, and all about your wife. You are accountable.
Jan his signal, John. You need to hurry. We're close.
So I'm assuming his daughter had that ARG degenerative disease that they talked about, if you remember this, in a previous PDA from several videos ago. But anyway, there were a couple PDAs here. This one belongs to Lincoln, the guy who was checking out DeSantos, brought in to investigate the disappearance of 2 scientists who were working under Dr. Milan, and he notes how relatively unorganized all the scientists in the area are, which is not what you would expect from a bunch of researchers. He also mentions industrial espionage, because he's investigating that too, and he rules out that the 2 scientists might have been involved in that, and thinks that they were murdered, but not by Charlotte or DeSantos. He rules out both of them. Lincoln is actually undercover as a research assistant. He has some emergency room experience, so he can kind of flub his way through it. Only Dr. Milan knows what he's really there for, and the doctor is at times a little too eager to help him with information for his investigation. He trusts Dr. Milan for some reason, even though he knows what kind of experimentation Milan does, and he wrote up a report about Charlotte Williams' experiments because he's pretty sure they're unofficial. But his report got intercepted by Dr. Milan and wasn't sent out, which he's a little uneasy about his authority being overruled like that. Dr. Backman starts getting a little too close to Lincoln's operation and gets ordered by Dr. Milan to take him out. Lincoln wants to kill him, but instead is ordered to just incapacitate him by breaking his kneecaps. Meanwhile, he starts to suspect Dos Santos in the whole industrial espionage thing, but is pretty sure that he's just a smirking shit-for-brains who was put up to it by somebody else. He realizes far too late that Dr. Milan is behind all the various events on the ship, and he tries to leave, but finds his access has been restricted by Dr. Milan, and the doctor has earmarked him to be in one of his experiments, and last we hear, he's in line for what they call processing. This other PDA is something we will want to pay attention to, because of who wrote it. It's Dr. Milan's PDA, and gives quite a window into the psyche of this guy. Dr. Milan starts by lamenting that he wants to make all this progress, that he wants to discover more about the unknown, but things like morals and paperwork and other scientists that don't want to do what he wants to do are holding him back, and says that will change one day. He mentions a couple of troublemakers, namely Dr. Way and Miss Callister, who are questioning his inability to keep things organized, inconsistencies in storage methods, but says they ultimately aren't worth the trouble of getting out of the way. But in the meantime, Dr. Backman is quite deranged, but Dr. Milan still finds him useful to hang around, although Dr. Backman keeps asking for more recently pregnant women for his seed project, and they aren't easy to come by, so they'll have to do it, quote, under the radar, unquote. Dr. Gray, he who created the ravenous insects from a couple videos ago, is complaining about the power outages making them more aggressive, and Dr. Milan doesn't really care. He plays chess with Dr. Gray and always wins, although Dr. Gray won't probably admit that. And Dr. Gray likes to talk about how he'd be the next best candidate for Milan's position, but Milan thinks he's a complete moron and longs for the day when, well, he will crush Dr. Gray's corpse under his feet. Mentions Dr. Charlotte Williams, and we finally get a concrete idea of what her experiment is, which is she's trying to recreate her dead lover in the form of a hybrid. Dr. Milan is, of course, okay with somebody else finding ways to create hybrids, so he just lets the research go. Dr. Backman is getting rid of too many experiments too fast, and there's a corpse overspill which causes contamination that leads to this growth and causes the fungus to spread throughout the ship. Milan is okay with this, and he even manipulates Dr. Gray into allowing the fungus to spread further, and strokes his ego now and then about the possibilities of a promotion. And he actually says that he's going to play the violin as Rome burns. He says that the Project Seed people, and in particular himself, are going to be perfectly safe while all this is going on. And as destruction and panic spreads throughout the ship, he intends to eventually just pick up the pieces and repurpose it so that his hybrid creations can take over. He proclaims himself as God, and in another entry mentions that this very thing almost happened before, but was snuffed out because it was part of the eugenics wars. It wasn't just corporations fighting each other. This was a wrinkle to it, or rather one of the main underlying causes of it. It reveals that Old Man Kane, the guy behind Kane Corporation, actually shared some of his ideals, but was held back by morals and ethics. And so, when Kane was in his hospital bed, he smothered him with a pillow. Hybrids adapt and grow and become more efficient killers as time goes on, and eventually they're running out of crew members who are still alive. Those that are dead are turned into the mulch that feeds the hybrid babies. We saw that a little bit earlier in the birthing lab. And he starts to move the groom lake out of range of communication so that no one can really escape or call the authorities and shut down his practice. There is one slight problem to this, which is DeSantos does get off that distress signal. And Milan says he's going to find a way to shut it off, and then he's going to, and this is what he says, castrate and destroy that drug-peddling little fuck. Man, Dr. Milan likes to talk a lot. Anyway, so the entire reason we came here, there are these open power cell housings along the side of this surgical table, and there's a surgical laser at the end of it. So, we're going to take all those power cells we got, and we're going to put them into these housings. It doesn't matter which order you do these in or which power cell goes in which housing. All of them work in all of the housings. Although, once you put some of these in, some of the subtitles don't change. In fact, for me, all three of them stayed exactly the same, saying, you can put a power cell in here, even though I already put the power cell in there. So just very methodically putting all the power cells in place, and that is going to power up the surgical laser. Some of you can probably tell where this is going already, but you have all the power cells in place. Now let's see just how effective this surgical laser is. Okay, looking on the bright side, the good news is the surgical laser works. Let's try that again. That's probably a lot of data lost. Let's try that again. You know, I think we're really making progress. Let's try this one more time. And that is how persistence pays off. Next time on Stasis, we'll see what's behind the looking glass.